Why your life feels heavy. The internal leaks. Your life might feel unnecessarily heavy, not just from external pressures, but from internal leaks. These include every thought left unguarded, every dollar spent on impulse, every unchecked emotion, and every careless word. This is where your power dissipates. Precision, not rigidity, is the essence of control. Most people don't achieve this, not due to a lack of potential, but because they haven't mastered energy retention. They speak when silence is needed, react when a pause is due, spend money trying to impress strangers, and believe every thought entering their mind is valid. However, the self-governed individual speaks less, feels more deeply, spends more wisely, and thinks more sharply. This isn't an innate quality, it's a cultivated one. The mouth, a gateway to lost power. Begin by focusing on your mouth. The average person talks more than they listen, and when they do listen, they're often just waiting for their turn to speak. Words are spilled to fill silence, ease discomfort, or mask insecurity. Yet every time you speak without a clear purpose, you diminish your presence and weaken your influence. The irony is, you rarely remember what you said, but others do. The slip-up, the over-explanation, the unnecessary apology. Words are akin to currency. The more you spend, the less valuable each becomes. This is why individuals with genuine strength speak sparingly. It's not that they lack things to say, but they understand that fewer words make each one more impactful. Speaking with clarity differs from speaking to be liked. The former builds respect, while the latter generates noise. Over time, noise transforms into static, distorting how others perceive you and, more critically, how you perceive yourself. It impacts your engagement with the world, makes conversations confusing, drains your energy, and ultimately buries your intended message. When you speak merely to gain approval, you begin to alter yourself, not to be more authentic, but to be more accepted. You adjust your words to be more agreeable, popular, or refined. You soften your boundaries to maintain others' comfort and smooth your edges to avoid disagreement. Gradually, your message loses its essence, and you lose clarity, not just in your words, but in your very identity. As Socrates wisely stated, "The greatest way to live with honor in this world is to be what we pretend to be." There's no honor, however, in making your speech a performance. If your voice becomes a mere reflection of what you believe others wish to hear, it ceases to be truly yours. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that being liked equates to success, that agreeableness ensures safety, and charm guarantees acceptance. But this mindset carries a significant cost: subtle self-betrayal. You agree to things you don't truly support, remain silent when you should speak up, and smile through discomfort. You tell yourself you're maintaining peace, but in reality, you're avoiding a difficult conversation with yourself. Speaking with clarity demands courage. It means articulating what needs to be said, even if it's unpopular or unrewarded. The impact on your mood. Words as an emotional GPS. When your speech lacks clarity, your mood often follows suit, quickly spiraling downwards. A careless word can lead to inner stress. A dramatic retelling fuels anger, and a few phrases of self-doubt can blossom into full-blown anxiety. We often assume emotions appear out of nowhere, but many are shaped by our language. We dwell on worst-case scenarios, rehash past wrongs, and rehearse fear as a daily ritual. The more we vocalize these, the more real they become. Your words serve as your emotional GPS. If they are scattered, your path will be too. Chaos in your speech inevitably leads to chaos in your life. Carl Jung observed, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." Often, what we resist most is silence, so we fill the void with commentary, complaints, and excessive explanations. This constant noise becomes our emotional operating system, Insecurities morph into verbal. Habits and doubts are repeated until they solidify into limitations. It's not solely that emotion controls our words. It's that our words perpetually fuel our emotions. Consider the small phrases you repeat unconsciously. I'm so tired. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. These are not throwaway lines. They are reinforcements. Each time you utter them, you're conditioning your nervous system to operate from that emotional space. Your mouth becomes the entry point for emotional turmoil. The more you speak without awareness, the less clearly you feel. When emotions run rampant, decisions stem from volatility, not vision. Aristotle brilliantly articulated this. Anyone can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, this is not easy. Emotional control isn't about suppressing feelings. It's about holding them long enough to comprehend them. This is the essence of emotional sovereignty, and it begins with recognizing how your words either stabilize or agitate your mind. Most people allow their words to run wild, not out of carelessness, but because they've never grasped the power of restraint. Silence was never presented as a strength. Instead, we were taught that speaking up signifies power. Yet not every thought requires a voice, and not every feeling demands an audience. The more you speak without reason, the less impact each word carries. Plato famously noted, "Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something." This resonates deeply when you realize how often people speak not to communicate, but to feel important, not to clarify, but to be seen. The tragedy is that in striving to be heard, we often obscure our true message and drown out what truly matters: the power of discipline and stillness. This is where discipline enters the picture, not the harsh, punitive kind, but the empowering kind. It's the discipline that prompts a pause before replying, that chooses presence over performance, that trusts silence when silence is the most potent response. The more deliberate your speech becomes, the more emotionally stable you grow. And with emotional stability, your decisions sharpen. You no longer rush into arguments, obsess over past conversations, or strive to win debates. You move with clarity, unburdened by ego. The Stoics' phrase, "endure and abstain," wasn't a call for suppression, but for strength, the strength to hold what matters and release what doesn't, to sit with discomfort without amplifying it. That calm, grounded presence is felt by others before you even speak. It lends weight to your words when you finally do. Mastering your mood is the initial step toward mastering your path. When your emotions are reactive, your direction is always skewed. You're spinning, not steering. Most people are unaware they've relinquished control, believing they're managing things when they're actually avoiding them. Not by confronting difficulties, but by seeking distractions. One scroll, one snack, one excuse at a time. We convince ourselves we need a break, but what we truly crave is an escape. Discomfort appears, and we perceive it as a threat. Instead of embracing the pressure, we gravitate towards something familiar. A song, a snack, a screen, a conversation that pulls us away from ourselves. This isn't because we're weak, but because we've been taught that pain signals something is wrong. However, most often pain is a teacher, not a warning. We've been sold the lie that peace comes from constant good feelings. True peace, however, emerges from facing what doesn't feel good and remaining steady. That's how resilience is forged. That's how you cease running from life and begin to lead it. Carl Jung observed, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And he was right. Facing yourself means sitting still long enough to feel the emotions you've been evading. It means breathing through anger instead of erupting, allowing fear to exist without letting it dominate. and understanding that sadness doesn't make you weak, it makes you real. Yet we still flee, masking our feelings with fleeting comforts because it's easier. It's easier to blame the day, the job, the weather, the traffic. It's easier to shrug and declare, "That's just how I am," as if moodiness is inherited or losing control is simply part of your personality. But the truth is, none of that defines who you are. It's merely what you've repeated, and what has been repeated can be replaced. Aristotle believed that virtue is cultivated, that character is built through habits, not inherited. If you've learned to panic under pressure, you can learn to remain calm. If you've learned to lash out, you can learn to pause. If stress currently causes you to collapse, with enough repetition, it can teach you to stand tall. But it doesn't begin with force, it begins with awareness. The next time pressure mounts, don't flee. Instead, notice it, name it, observe it carefully. Most often, it's not about fixing what you feel, but about understanding its origin. Simply sitting with the feeling, even for a few minutes, transforms your relationship with it. You don't need to rush to change it, you just need to stop running from it. This is the genesis of emotional discipline, not pretending everything is fine, but also not allowing every feeling to control you. True discipline isn't cold, it's calm. It provides you with options, and with practice, everything becomes clearer. You cease being ruled by emotion and begin leading with clarity. And when clarity enters, better decisions inevitably follow. The ripple effect, money and mindset. Here, the ripple effect begins. Emotional instability doesn't just impact your mood, it shapes your finances. Many financial missteps aren't due to a lack of knowledge, but to emotional turmoil. The wrong purchase, at the wrong time, the quick fix chosen without thought. Not because you needed the item, but because you needed to feel something. That pair of shoes, the latest gadget, the delivery food you didn't even crave, the expensive night out that felt hollow by morning. None of it was truly about the object. It was about the moment. You were tired, restless, unsure of yourself. The purchase became a distraction, a superficial bandage over deeper discomfort. The issue most of the time isn't the spending itself, but the underlying emotional state. This is the aspect most people overlook, yet it shapes everything else. Plato's profound statement, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself," encompasses the part of you that perpetually seeks comfort instead of learning to endure. Discomfort. Money decisions made from a place of instability are rarely sound. People don't invest wisely when scared, save when emotionally drained, or spend with clarity when lost. And what's most striking is that the world understands this. The world capitalizes on your emotional reactivity. Marketing, notifications, urgency. They're not designed for your rational mind. They're designed to prod your insecurities, stir your fear, and alleviate your boredom. If you're emotionally ungrounded, you'll spend not out of desire but out of imbalance. You'll label it a reward, but it's a reaction. You'll call it self-care, but it's self-avoidance. You'll call it treating yourself, but what you're truly trying to treat is the internal tension. But this cycle doesn't have to persist. There's an alternative. You can pause before purchasing, breathe before swiping. You can acknowledge the urge rising and still choose not to act on it. This isn't restriction, it's direction, it's power. You reclaim control not by eliminating joy, but by choosing joy that aligns with who you are, not joy coerced by a moment of emotional weakness. You begin to discern between purchases that enhance your life and those that deplete it. You learn when you're investing in your future and when you're simply trying to numb your present. When your emotions are balanced, your relationship with money transforms. You stop chasing superficial allure, stop needing possessions to validate you, and stop spending to be noticed. Instead, you begin to spend with intention, with purpose, guided by inner peace rather than impulse. Socrates stated that the unexamined life is not worth living. In today's world, It's the unexamined impulse that inflicts the most damage. A single small decision made from the wrong emotional state can ripple for weeks, even months. And the damage isn't just financial, it's mental. It reinforces a pattern. I feel bad, so I buy. I feel empty, so I spend. I feel restless, so I consume. You don't need to isolate yourself from everything. You just need to understand what your decisions are truly attempting to solve. Are they building your foundation or merely filling a void? The truth is, no purchase can fix how you feel if you're disconnected from yourself. The item may arrive, but the emptiness will remain. The good news: you can rewire this. You can choose differently. You can slow down. You can listen to what your body is truly asking for. You can create space between the feeling and the action. In that space, your power returns. Not because you denied yourself, but because you finally decided to stop running. Socrates taught that the unexamined life is not worth living, but an unexamined impulse, especially concerning money, is equally perilous. Every unexamined impulse is a seed of regret waiting to sprout. It may not manifest immediately. Sometimes it appears as debt, sometimes as dissatisfaction, but eventually it reveals itself. This isn't about being rigid or depriving yourself. It's about becoming rooted. You don't have to deny yourself what you desire, but you need to understand why you desire it. You need to identify which part of you is reaching for your wallet. Whether you're building your future or buying a moment of relief, aligning with your purpose or merely distracting yourself from discomfort. The novelty fades, the package is opened, and if your inner world remains unchanged, you're left with the same ache, just with less money. But when you commit to the real work, the inner work, things shift. You don't just spend less, you spend better. You stop seeking external validation through purchases and cease using money as a substitute for meaning. Your spending becomes a reflection of your values, not your emotions. You begin to invest in what fosters your growth, not just what provides 5 minutes of temporary relief. You enter spaces already feeling complete, eliminating the need to prove anything to anyone. This kind of wholeness cannot be bought. It is earned through discipline, through silence, through consistent choices made from presence, not performance, from intention, not impulse. The world won't tell you this. It will sell you the opposite. It will reward your reactions, your distractions, your emotional spending. It will push messages like, treat yourself. You deserve this. Buy now. Figure it out later. But dopamine comes with a debt. That quick burst of pleasure often carries a slow burn of consequence. You might not see it in your bank account, but you'll feel it in your habits, your focus, your energy. The more you soothe yourself with spending, the more your nervous system begins to rely on consumption for comfort. This is how addiction begins, not always with drugs or alcohol, but with behaviors that seem harmless because everyone else is engaging in them too. Society has normalized reactive spending. Had a tough day? Buy something. Feeling overlooked? Spend big. Tired? Unsure? Unmotivated? Retail therapy? But this kind of therapy is a short-term fix, a band-aid over something deeper. The relief quickly fades, but the emptiness tends to linger. Carl Jung noted, "People don't have ideas. Ideas have people." One of the most potent ideas people live under today is that their value can be bought or at least showcased. That to feel worthy, you must own something. To belong, you must visibly demonstrate belonging. This idea controls people, shaping their spending, their comparisons, and their self-definition. Money, like words, is power. And like words, most people don't use it to strengthen themselves. They use it to be seen, to be admired, to feel significant. Not because they truly want the item, but because they desire a feeling, respect, validation, control. Plato famously stated, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." Money is power, so how you handle it reveals who is truly in charge, you or your impulses. If you spend to fortify your life, you're using money as a tool. If you spend to impress, you're using it as a mask. Every dollar you spend narrates a story, not just about your tastes, but about your priorities, your character, your discipline. Are you buying to build or buying to broadcast? One leads to peace, the other to noise disguised as confidence. Sometimes, the broadcast is subtle. A luxury item you can't truly afford but post anyway. A dinner you didn't budget for but desired the photo. A designer piece bought not for your joy but for your image. That's not empowerment. It's emotional outsourcing. Using purchases to articulate what you haven't figured out how to express on your own. Eventually, the performance ends, the audience moves on, the post is buried, and you're left with yourself. Same emotions, same insecurities, only now with a receipt attached. That's the price of emotional spending. Temporary validation, long-term a cost. Aristotle believed in eudaimonia, a life of flourishing achieved not through indulgence, but through purpose and virtue. True happiness, he asserted, wasn't found in excess but in excellence, the kind that comes from self-knowledge and living in alignment with it. So, the real test isn't whether you can afford something, it's whether the purchase reflects the person you are becoming. If it doesn't, if it's merely another attempt to fill an internal void that cannot be filled with material possessions, then no price tag will ever feel worth it. Eventually, the applause dies down. The likes cease. The high dissipates, and the deeper ache returns, untouched, unchanged. That's the moment most people buy again. But it can also be the moment something different occurs, where you pause, observe, and choose to stop pouring your power into things that offer no true return. Because financial freedom isn't solely about income, it's about internal stability. It's not about accumulating more, it's about needing less. That's where your true strength begins. Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia, a flourishing that stems from purpose rather than pleasure, taught that genuine happiness is found in disciplined, action aligned with your higher self. This is why our spending habits matter. They reflect either who we're becoming or who we're attempting to impress, often strangers or worse, people who aren't even paying attention. We sacrifice our peace chasing approval in a race no one else is watching. We trade internal alignment for a fleeting moment of external attention, a trade that always results in loss. The shift begins with a simple pause, a new reflex. The next time the urge to spend arises, slow down. Notice the emotion fueling it. Boredom, stress, loneliness, perhaps. Instead of reacting, confront the feeling. Breathe through it. Write it down. Move your body. Create space for presence before making a purchase. Because sometimes, what you're reaching for isn't a product, it's peace. And peace doesn't come in packages. It comes from self-respect, self-awareness, and the knowledge that you resisted an impulse. This kind of restraint builds something stronger than mere satisfaction. It builds self-trust and confidence. Not the confidence that comes from having, but the confidence that comes from holding. Socrates wisely stated, "He who is not contented with what he has would not be contented with what he would like to have." If you aren't grounded in who you already are, no purchase will ever fill that void. It might provide a temporary lift, but it won't cultivate the mindset that sustains genuine peace. And without that mindset, even a substantial bank account can feel empty. Financial discipline isn't about being stingy. It's about being deliberate. It's understanding that your worth isn't tied to your attire, your vehicle, or your online posts. It's tied to how closely your actions align with your values. True strength manifests in those small, unseen decisions that no one applauds, yet change everything over time. Every dollar you spend shapes something, either your future or your facade. You are either planting seeds for growth or scattering your energy on temporary highs. The truth is, no amount of shopping will make you feel sufficient if you haven't decided you already are. And that kind of belief, That grounded, silent knowing of your worth cannot be bought. It must be built. Built through awareness, through discipline, through the quiet choice to stop letting the world dictate how you spend your power. Each time you resist an impulsive purchase, you reclaim a piece of your energy. Every time you prioritize your values over your urges, you move closer to freedom. And that freedom, though not loud, is life-changing. Mastering your mind, the ultimate control beneath it all, the way you speak, the way you feel, the way you spend, lies the way you think. Your mind is the soil from which everything else grows, yet most people leave it entirely unguarded. They allow any thought, fear, or belief to take root. No filter, no awareness, no protection, just noise masquerading as truth. Your mind isn't a dumping ground. It's a control center. If you don't guard what enters, you cannot control what leaves. Your words, your decisions, your behaviors, your habits. Most people don't grasp this because they confuse mental activity with mental authority. A loud thought isn't always a true thought, but if you never slow down, you won't perceive the difference. Carl Jung stated, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is precisely what happens when you leave your mind unexamined. You begin reacting to fears that aren't truly yours, living out patterns you never agreed to, and following narratives planted by others, your upbringing, your culture, your past pain, without ever pausing to edit the script. Silence changes that. Not silence as in muting the world, but silence as in encountering yourself. Sitting with your thoughts without obeying them, observing them come and go, discerning which ones serve you and which ones don't. That stillness, that awareness, is the genesis of reclaiming your mind. But stillness isn't easy. It reveals things. It exposes the patterns you buried under noise. It forces you to confront the discomfort you drowned in distractions. Yet that discomfort is the beginning of clarity. That's where real change commences. Plato famously said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self, and the battlefield is your own mind." Because if you cannot sit with your breath without checking your phone, if you cannot experience peace without external validation, if silence makes you spiral, then you are not free. That's not calm, it's dependence. Freedom begins when you stop reacting to every thought, when you identify a pattern before it overtakes you, when you create just enough space between stimulus and response to choose something better. That tiny space, that split second of observation, is where your power resides. You don't need to believe every thought you think. You don't need to follow every story your mind tells you. You can stop, observe, and choose again. Each time you do, you reclaim control, stepping out of chaos and into command. That's how mental clarity is earned. Slowly, silently, through deliberate attention and repeated choices. The more you train your mind, the less power you yield to noise. The more inner calm you cultivate, the less external chaos controls you. So, how do you reclaim your mind? You start by interrupting the cycle of reaction. You learn to catch a thought before you follow it. When anxiety rises, you pause, not to suppress it, but to examine it. You begin to differentiate between signal and noise. You become a witness to your thoughts, not a slave to them. And the more you observe without immediate engagement, the more space you create between what you feel and how you respond. That space, that split second of awareness, is where your power lives. That's where the transformation occurs. It's the point where you cease being a puppet of your fear and begin to author your choices. Socrates asserted that the unexamined life is not worth living, but an unobserved mind is equally perilous. You can set goals, pursue dreams, and craft plans, but if your mind is chaotic, you'll sabotage every step. You'll talk yourself out of opportunities, overthink progress, and retreat from discomfort. Not because the world is against you, but because your own thoughts make it feel that way. And here's the uncomfortable truth. No amount of external success will save you from internal disorder. You can have money, followers, accolades, but if your internal world is a storm, all of it will feel empty. That's why so many individuals achieve more than they imagined, yet still wake up with anxiety, emptiness, or dread. Peace isn't the reward for success, it's the prerequisite. Aristotle believed that happiness, eudaimonia, stems from living in alignment with your highest self, through discipline, virtue, and reason. But none of that is possible when your thoughts are scattered, loud, or reactive. In the absence of awareness, the only voice you hear is the one yelling the loudest, and that voice is usually fear. That's what keeps us trapped. Not just the thoughts themselves, but our clinging to them. We replay moments that made us feel small, carry memories of failure as proof, and rewatch past conversations, mentally rewriting them to lessen the pain. We create worst-case scenarios and then inhabit them as if they've already occurred. This isn't because danger is omnipresent. It's because the brain, in its effort to protect us from pain, begins to anticipate it constantly, even in peace. This is how anxiety proliferates, not because something bad is happening, but because we've been rehearsing it in our minds for so long that our nervous system believes it already has. This is why mental training is crucial. Like physical discipline, it demands consistency, repetition, and intention. You begin by noticing the patterns, the thought that appears when you're tired, the belief that surfaces when you fail, the story you hear in the quiet when no one is watching. Then you name it. You confront it, not to fight it, but to understand it. You stop treating every thought as truth. You begin to edit your inner dialogue instead of merely obeying it. Because the moment your mind becomes truly yours. Again, when you stop feeding every doubt, every fear, every story you never chose, you create space for something else. Clarity. You stop reacting, you stop chasing, you stop spinning in unproductive loops. Your decisions sharpen, your presence deepens, your focus cuts through noise, and you finally begin to live not by momentum or panic, but by choice. That's when life begins to transform. Not because the world changed, but because you became quiet enough to see clearly. And in that stillness, a deeper truth reveals itself. One that has always been there. You don't need to control the world. You only need to command your mind. Once you do that, nothing outside of you can ever truly control you again. Master your mouth, your mood, your money, and your mind. And the world will no longer pull you out of alignment because you are finally anchored within. That's the shift, quiet but undeniable. When your inner world is steady, the outer one begins to respond with respect.